Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be showing you how to paint this really fun landscape in Procreate. I am using brushes and paper textures from my watercolor landscape kit that you can find linked down below. The first thing we are going to do is set up our canvas. So I'm going to duplicate the paper texture canvas that's already pre-made, and then I am going to import my reference image. So just going to click the wrench icon, select reference, and navigate to where you have it saved. Then I'm going to go and crop this canvas to a similar dimension. You can input the numbers if you have a specific number in mind for the size of the canvas, but I'm just going to crop it to a rectangle. Then the next step is to start sketching out our scene, and I'm just going to do this based on the image that I have. So I have looked at it, studied it, and I realized that I'm going to do this in about 4 different sections. I'm going to have the mountains at the top, then I'm going to do the trees in the background, then the water, and then I'm going to focus on the trees in the foreground. And I did this on a layer above the paper texture. Once I have the sketch how I want it, I'm then going to work on selecting the colors. So I've provided a free color palette that you can download and use for this. And the colors in the top row are all the colors I selected to do the mountains, while the middle colors are the colors that I'm going to use to do the different sets of trees. And then the last row of colors are the colors that I'm going to use for the sea. And when I'm finished, I'm just going to drag the palette and I'm going to put it on the left side of the interface, just so that I have it visible at all times. You can also resize the reference image, and I'm just going to make sure that everything is right there so I don't have to be going back and forward, and it will make the painting process a lot more smoother and easier. So now we're going to start working on the painting itself, and I'm going to lower the opacity of our sketch, and on the layer below I am going to select the lightest color, and I'm using the sharp liner to paint in the sky area. Now you can't see it in this part of the video, but I'm just painting it in that space, and I'm going to use the feathered blender to blend out the bottom edge because I want the bottom edge to be very soft. I don't want the lines visible on the other layers up front. So to create my mountains, I've created a new layer, and I'm just going to use the next color on the palette to paint that layer with the same sharp liner brush. Then I'm going to blend out the bottom edge with the feathered liner. And I'm just going to repeat this for all the mountains by just using darker colors as I come closer to the mountains at the front, and use the feathered blender brush to blend out the bottom edge. So this is what you're going to do to paint the mountains in this painting. When I finish painting all my mountains, I'm then going to go to the layers panel, and I'm going to group them all together. Now I'm leaving them all separate in case I need to go back and adjust any of the colors. But if you are happy with the colors of your mountains, you can merge them all together. Then I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to start painting in the water. For this, I am just going to use the reference image to see where I'm going to be putting my colors, and I am going to leave the areas where the trees will be without paint. I'm just going to paint the parts where I want the sea to have color. So I started with the lightest color first, and then I'm going to add the darker colors where I noticed them on the reference image. Again, I'm using the sharp liner brush, but you can use any of the painting or the drawing watercolor brushes in the kit. When I'm done, I'm just going to use the feathered blender and at a relatively large size to blend all the colors together. I am not trying to get rid of any colors, I just want them to blend into each other naturally as if they were done with real watercolors. And that is what I'm trying to achieve at all the steps. I'm not trying to make this look too perfect because with real watercolors, it is a little bit unpredictable. Even though you know where you put your paint, they do bleed and kind of have a mind of their own. So I want to capture that with these brushes as well. When you are done painting, we are then going to move on to the trees. I am using one of the pine brushes. You can use any of those pine brushes that you would like. And I'm just going to draw a line of trees in the back. I'm also going to use the move tool to help me adjust them so that they fit where I want them to be. Then I'm going to use the feathered blender to blend out the bottom of these trees because again I don't want that harsh line to show up on any of the layers that I'm going to be working on in front. Then I've created a new layer and I'm selecting a darker color and I'm going to add some more trees in front of those. Then I just went in with a sharp liner and I erased the bottom so that it becomes a smooth straight line. And I did this because if you look at the reference image, you can see that these trees, you can clearly see the bottom and it is a straight line. And the areas that are going to be behind the other trees that I'm going to add, I will use the feathered blender brush to get rid of the harsh edges. Now we're going to start painting the trees that are more towards the foreground. I'm starting with the ones on the right side and I'm using a pine brush to stamp some trees of different colors and different sizes. I'm using a mixture of some of the colors that I use in the other areas of the painting, and then I'm going to add some larger darker trees towards the front. So if needed, you can use the eraser to get rid of some of the trees that may have gone out of the guidelines that you've drawn. And then I'm using the jaggy brush to fill in the bottom of these trees. This particular brush has very rough texture and I feel like it would work really well for this part, but you can use any of the other drawing brushes that you prefer. I'm also going to stamp in various different colors at the bottom just to create some variation and fill in some of that white space that was left behind. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing and paint the trees on the left side. Now we're going to work on the reflection. Simply group those layers with the trees together. And I haven't added that first layer of trees that we did because we're not going to need to create a reflection for that one. I'm just doing the three that are closer to us. And I'm going to rename this layer the trees just so that we know what they are. Then we're going to duplicate that layer to get our reflections. And our reflections will go underneath the group with the trees. And I'm going to work on these reflections one by one so you can hide the rest. And I'm going to start with the ones furthest in the back. And I'm going to tap on the move icon. I'm going to flip them vertically and drag them down a little bit. Then I'm going to use the eraser to get rid of the part of the reflection that will be behind the trees. I don't want the sharp lines that may be showing through. And I'm going to do this on both sides. Once I am happy with that, I'm going to move on to the trees on the left, well, on the right side. And if you look at the reference image, of course I'm going to flip it again and I'm going to pull it down. But if you look at the reference image, you will notice that the reflection is slanted. So I want to make mine as slanted as well. So I'm going to select the distort option, and the container that has this reflection, I'm going to make sure that it is in the same direction as the one that I am looking at in the reference image. Then I'm going to erase any parts of that reflection that may be overlapping the trees. And for the reflection on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. Once you're happy with the placement of these reflections, you can then merge them all together and then lower the opacity or change the blend mode to suit how you want yours to look. To complete this, I am using the abstract painter brush and a dark green to draw some foliage at the front. This brush has a really natural rough look that can be really great for doing foliage, so that is why I started with that one. Then I'm going to stamp in some trees of varying sizes and colors. I'm keeping the colors very dark because these are the ones that are closest to us and they will be darker. Once I'm happy with the placement of the trees, I'm going back in with the abstract painter and I'm adding some more darker colors all along the bottom. Now, once you're finished with this step, you can take a look at your painting and see if there's any areas that may need fixing. I wanted my water to have a little bit more contrast and a little more darker colors, specifically at the areas where there were shadows. So I went back in with those darker colors and added them. And then I also just added some white areas to a few more places. But that is pretty much it for this painting. And if you have the full watercolor kit, there's also another paper texture that you can import and just stretch it to fit the canvas. Then you can change the blend mode to linear burn or color burn. And then you can duplicate the layer once or twice to get an even more intense texture. And that is it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed this really quick tutorial. If you do recreate this, you can tag me on Instagram. I would really love to see how yours turned out. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me.